The topic right now before us is hypothermia. And just as a little FYI, the athlete that is right here, crap number 21, is sitting in the back of the audience right now. That's you, Erica. Right there. So she'll take autographs later. She does not have a book out, but she'll do that. And I think that one of the key things to success in open water is being flexible. And when we say flexible, I really mean exactly that. And you can start out with a very bright, sunshiny day, which we had in Melbourne, which was a slide that flipped by before you. And then an hour and a half later, this is what you have. And the race was called when the police boat flipped upside down. And it was deemed that the athletes probably shouldn't be in there either. So the race was called. Since they were only 15K into the 25K, the immediate response by the organizers was, well, they're just swimming again tomorrow. That was equally unpopular. So what they did the next day is they actually started at the position where the athletes were when they were stopped, and then they started over again from there. So this is a situation where you're not looking at rescue, you're looking at evacuation of an entire course. And how do you plan for that? And whether that's like conditions like we face there, whether that's temperature, which we'll be talking a lot more about, or other issues, I think all of those are part of this concern. Yeah, that's what the day looked like literally 15 minutes, or an hour and a half before. Pretty incredible change. Well, it's going to be that way.
Jim, was that a forecast failure? Or?
No. Just totally out of the blue.
Well, they had forecasted strong winds, but no one quite expected that.
And with that, the day before, we had all these other critters that blew in with it. So one thing I'm going to bore you with just a little bit in both of these, and I think that this is critical to understand, are what are the energy exchange principles that affect these athletes, as well as the people that are, of course, working the event. Here are two of them. Radiation, which is a pretty easy principle. That's basically sunshine, and that's radiant energy that hits you. Conduction is transfer of something hot to something cold, or vice versa. Example, just sitting in cold, still water. We all know the difference of when that cold water moves, which I'm going to jump ahead and kind of correlate these two to convection, so that when the water is moving, it's very different than when it's sitting still. Because you're heating water, it moves on, you heat the next water, it moves on, you heat the next water, it moves. So, very different heat loss principle. And then evaporation is a pretty simple concept also. But all four of these go into the process of energy exchange. And as event directors, as coaches, as athletes even, you need to understand the differences of those situations because your venue is constantly changing. So we're talking about hypothermia today, and there's a whole lot of levels of severity, and so we're all referring to the same thing. What are they? And here's mild. There's actually two levels of those. For those of us that are centigrade impaired, I've put that in yellow. There's a mild level of severity, which is just shivering and impairment of some fine motor movement. Pretty easy ideas. How do you take care of these guys? You just warm them up. Or say swim faster and they'll warm up. Then you have the next degree drops, everything above plus impairment of central nervous system. And when you start involving brain, things can decline at an extraordinarily fast pace. So as soon as you start losing coordination, you start getting funny answers from your athlete, any of those things, you have to click on the watch. Because you can slip from mild to the next degrees very, very quickly. Moderate level of hypothermia, here are the temperature grades. Now these are core temperature grades for the athlete. This is what their body's experiencing. And notice that the treatment no longer is basic, it's everything but basic. Shivering starts to slow down, may stop, may slow, substantial slowing in mental function. Those of you that are coaches frequently look at the coordination of the athlete's stroke. how it flows, how it's different than it usually is. It can cause hallucinations, it can cause all kinds of different things between twitching, and here you start getting into cardiac things, irregular heartbeats. Okay? And this is still considered moderate. Well, you can tell you're on the brink of disaster here with these temperatures also. And that's one reason why treatment is everything but simple. You have to, A, protect the athlete from further loss so they can't swim through this. This is time to get out. No aggressive rewarming, because what happens is the peripheral vessels shut down. If you try to shake them and you try to move them around, all that cold blood that's on the outside will go to the core, which is not where you want it, so you can't rub them warm. Now they'll pink up for you, but what you're doing is you're cooling them down further.
Jim, can you define aggressive rewarming?
Rubbing?
Could you define aggressive? You said no aggressive rewarming.
Aggressive rewarming is actually rubbing the extremities. So frequently you'll see a coach out there and they're rubbing vigorously over the athlete's arms and legs, and that actually puts cold water or cold blood deeper into them. Warmed IVs are critical here. I'm kind of known internationally as the crazy American physician that takes all of his IV bags and buries them in the warm sand, because then when I need it, it's heated to put it in the athlete. Of course, if it's raining and cold outside, that doesn't work. And then there's severe. And there's only one word for severe, is you are in trouble and didn't recognize it soon enough. Again, central nervous system, anytime that starts getting involved, you can go into this state very quickly, because that nervous system controls heart rhythms, that nervous system controls consciousness, seizures, all kinds of bad things, which you do not want on your hands. Emergency treatment, very simple, get them out of there. This is something, do you have time to manage that IV on the beach? No. Get them out of there. Let the ambulance do that stuff. So this is evacuation. Central warming, there's all kinds of techniques that can be used in an emergency setting. Now, interestingly enough, Eric's events in Roberval, they have IV warming capability on site. That whole system's all set up to go. So when they have somebody that goes into hypothermia to the point of starting to have some of these symptoms, they're more dangerous taking the time to go to the hospital than they are putting them in their little minor hospital with all their capabilities there. It's the only place I've ever seen in the world that does that. And Roberval is quite an example for all of us. So here's a great example. This is the same Melbourne day. And you can see you have convection with the wind, you have conduction with the rain, you have evaporation, sweating, and there's still that component because they're all wrapped up in plastic. And then you still have sunshine that's coming and going. So you have all these things working at the same time on a bright sunny day when we didn't think we were going to have any problems at all. Now here's the current FINA rule minus the part in yellow, which is not in the FINA rule book. That is, again, for those of you who are centigrade impaired. And this is the way. Second try, somebody just got that joke. But anyway, and this is the way the current rule reads. Is at 16 degrees. It has checkpoints. It has the depth of the checking. It says in the middle of the course at a certain depth. You know, and that's how that is. Current rules. Now, if you have a linear course, where's the middle? If you have a circular course, that's pretty easy. If you have a triangular course, that's pretty easy. If you have a linear course like they have, where's the middle? How do you measure it? What type of thermometer are you using? Digital? You're measuring mercury? You're measuring... There's lots of issues here which are not clearly spelled out for them. And they want that information. Okay? And then, of course, here's the commission that's formed to decide whether an event is going to go or not go. So I'm going to toss out some questions to the panel in just a moment, but here is your panel. and I'm going to have them introduce themselves just very briefly so you know who you're talking to. Really an incredible panel, and the international experience these guys have is second to none. So I'll just pass the microphone down and have them tell you just a few sentences about themselves.
I'm Marcia Cleveland. I've done some marathon swims all over the world, and I've probably been to about, I would say, the low end of mild hypothermia.
Hi, I'm Paul Asmuth. I raced in professional marathon swimming for 13 years after college. I raced pretty much all around the world, English Channel, and several times in Lac Saint Jean, and was a kind of a tall, skinny kid, and learned how to race well in cold water, and also had hypothermic experience in Lac Saint Jean, where I passed out, and Eric and his team saved my life.
Yes, my name is Eric. I'm the general manager for WOWSA, and we are every year we have hypothermic, okay, and we have to deal with that, and we have to always ready for the severe condition, okay. If you have some question about that, we have experience about hypothermia.
So the first question I would ask, and I'll direct this at both Paul and Marcia, is if you have an athlete and you're monitoring their movement through the water and all of those different things, what tricks do you guys use to determine whether your athlete is, quote, getting into trouble? And I'm going to use that term selectively because if you get to those last phases, you didn't do your job. Your job is to collect them as they're moving through that, understanding that that can happen very quickly. So.
You want me to go first? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of the things you're going to listen for is how is their speech, and if they are talking like they have marbles in their mouth, that's a sign that things are going downhill. But it's still recoverable. Some of the things I would say at the time is to kick faster. We might do some sprinting at that point. You could also, from the sport boat, administer hot liquids, and that often can reverse something quickly. The other thing is sometimes we ask questions. I do this in training a lot of the times. Like you ask, like, what's your phone number? Because you can test their speech plus their lucidity at that point. And also, if their skin is turning gray instead of pink, that's something you want to watch because the blood is staying in their core organs instead of circulating around their body. So.
Yeah, the one other thing I didn't mention, I work with the U.S. national team, the open water national team, and in the races, the World Championship races, like the one that was in Lac Saint Jean last summer, the athletes, they don't all have a boat right next to them, so we're having to make a decision, trying to communicate with them within a few seconds. We don't have a boat, we don't have a board or something like that, so they're on typically some sort of loop course, 2K, 2.5K, so you're seeing them maybe if there's 2 docks every 15 minutes. So with everything, I agree with everything Marcia said. In addition, you're checking their tempo. What was their tempo, stroke tempo at the beginning, the first couple hours? What is it now? How is it changing? And if you see a rapid change,